Good morning. Welcome to, this is the second installment of my stories and lessons of the road. And this one is titled, Who is the Author? And I'll make that a little more clear to you towards the end. So first, a little bit about my my everyday routine as I was walking across Canada. The day would start with waking up in your sleeping bag, all nice and warm and comfortable, well rested. First thing I would do is find out what time it was. Turn on the phone, find your phone in the dark, turn it on and see what time it was. Then I would sort of immediately in my mind, and this is something I just settled into, I would calculate my day. I knew it took an hour and a half to get out of bed and actually get on the road, get everything packed up. And then I knew it took 10 hours of walking at 4 kilometers an hour to get your 40 kilometers in. And I knew I would probably stop for about an hour having lunch or a coffee or talking with somebody. And so I knew my day as soon as I woke up was 12 and a half hours minimum to get my 40 kilometers in. So at the beginning and at the end of the journey, daylight was critical because there was only 12 hours in the day that was really bright. And so you had to get up and get going. In the middle of the journey, daylight wasn't a problem because you had 16 or 17 hours of daylight, and getting up and getting going in the morning wasn't as crucial. So I'd wake up and look at my clock. Depending on when it was during the journey, I'd either fall back asleep or get going. And often I would I seem to never do anything always. I was always sort of thinking this is the best routine, and then I would change and do something different. But I would try often in the morning to remember my dreams and review them. I was interested and still am in trying to be better connected with my dream time and make it more of my day. So that was one thing I tried to work on the journey. So I'd wake up and start getting packed up. After I realized cooking wasn't sort of a reasonable thing to do, I switched to sandwiches, and I ate sandwiches for 5 months. So I'd make sandwiches every morning in the tent. Because it was possible that it was raining outside, or the mosquitoes were bad, or it was dark and you needed light. I had a little bubble light in the tent. So the easiest thing to do, and everything was in the tent, so the easiest thing to do was just sit in the tent and make a bunch of sandwiches and pack them in the container, and then that would be food for the day. And then if you ran across a restaurant or some other source of food, the sandwiches would always be good tomorrow. The sandwiches changed with the seasons a bit. I couldn't, initially I was having meat and cheese and things that were all right if they didn't get too warm. And then as the seasons changed into summer and temperature went up, a lot of possibilities in my sandwiches kind of disappeared with the warmth. And so meat and cheese basically were no longer part of the sandwich routine. So it became, in the end, it became peanut butter, butter, honey, bananas, apples. That was a large part of my diet, those items. So it was the same routine. most every morning. And I remember talking to my son one time, Matthew, and saying to him, I'm getting a little tired of the routine. And I explained it to him, and he just said, well, change your routine. And I thought, suppose I could do that. And so I changed things up, and kept changing things up to keep things sort of interesting. So then I would start walking. I would often take a look at the weather if I was in cell range, and see what I could expect in the day. And then also you'd take a look at Google Maps and see where you're heading and see what's kind of down the road, and then start walking. And I would try not to look at my progress, although I knew what time it was. I wouldn't look at my progress until much later in the day. So after 11 hours had elapsed, or 12 and a half hours from getting up, I would check my progress. And I would check my progress either by Google Maps and see how far I'd walked. And if that wasn't available, then just by my steps. My phone has a what do you call it, pedometer to count your steps, and I found it really accurate. I tested it before I left on the journey, and very, very accurate. So I knew towing the trailer was about 1,500 steps per kilometer. So 40 kilometers, I had to get 60,000 steps in my day before I had achieved my 40 kilometers. So that was 10 hours walking, solid. I did about 4 kilometers an hour. So if I got up at 5, 5:30 later on that day, I would check my progress, and then I would adjust my evening accordingly. If I felt good and I had lots of energy, I would just keep walking, because there was another maybe 2 hours left in my legs that I had the energy to keep going. One thing I learned was I only had so much sort of energy, and if I went too long one day, I would have less energy the next day. And so you would start walking, and often it was beautiful. The sun would be shining and be a light wind at your back, and it would be a very pleasant and beautiful way to start your morning. And then sometimes it would be pouring rain and not quite so beautiful, but always, I think, rewarding. So getting out of your sleeping bag in the morning, you generally knew you were climbing into clothes that were either a little bit cold or a little bit wet, and that was kind of the first discomfort you had to just accept and get on with it. And the only way of solving that was to get walking and warm up. So that was the kind of the first challenge of the day. And then start walking, and the walking became somewhat of a meditation often, especially if the traffic was minimal and the road shoulder was wide, and you could relax as you're progressing. Sometimes that wasn't the case, and you couldn't relax, and you had to keep your eye on the traffic, and that was strenuous. I would feel it on my body because you're tense, and cars are whizzing by, and you're literally a couple feet or closer sometimes to the vehicles, and you can't move over because the condition of the shoulder is such that you can't tow a trailer on it. So sometimes it was stressful, the walking, and often it wasn't. So that would kind of weigh on your energy level also. And then your energy level was also somewhat dictated by, if my feet were feeling good or not, and if I was kind of in that blister phase or not, and the pain would be kind of draining on your energy. So that would make your day a challenge, but luckily that wasn't the norm. Most of the time I felt fine, and it was just a matter of getting those hours in and getting those steps in. The trailer itself was never felt sort of extremely heavy, other than if you had a steep hill to go up or go down. If it was really steep going down, it was also a challenge because you're holding the trailer back, and that was hard on your back, actually, for me. Going up was just a matter of leaning into it. So, in some aspects, a steep hill down was harder than a steep hill up, which is quite common even when you're backpacking. It's the downhills that really get to you. So the day would go on, and you'd often be pleasantly surprised by finding a coffee shop or a restaurant that you could grab something at, and often the day you'd be on Google Maps, you'd say, oh, there's a restaurant just 15 kilometers down the road. I'll be there in roughly 4 hours, and you'd get there, and sometimes the restaurant would be open, and sometimes the restaurant would be closed, and has been closed for years. But so yeah, you never. I learned to not take things for granted when I looked on sort of on Google Maps, and I'm not knocking Google Maps. It was a tremendous tool, but you just had to be aware that there's a lot of information for it to keep track of, and it's not all updated. So the day would go on, and as the evening approached, I would check my progress and either start looking for a place to camp or decide to keep going or just sit down and take a rest. Sometimes I would have my 60,000 steps in, but there was still a lot of daylight, and depending where you were, you didn't really want to set up too early in the day because you might not be sort of welcome where you're setting up, and you didn't. I tried hard not to inconvenience anybody with where I set up at night. But you also wanted the traffic to be down, and the day to be coming to an end for everybody as you were setting up your camp. So lots of times there was lots of daylight left, and I would just sort of drag into the evening slowly, kind of thing, and looking for a nice place. So then the night would come, and you would go through the process of setting up your tent. If you were wet, if the tent was wet and everything was wet, I'd often start the evening by spreading everything out. If it wasn't raining, spread everything out and just get a little bit of drying time in there before you set up the tent. And when I say everything, I mean just the tent, basically, because everything else, your sleeping bag and everything else, was usually dry. It could be moist, but it wasn't wet. So you try to dry the tent out a little before you set it up sometimes, and then set it up and climb in, do the internet stuff that I would report back to my daughter, and then climb into bed and start the process again the next day. So that became the day, was that general routine. It varied. like I said, but that was more or less the day. As the trip went on, I became more and more reliant on restaurants as I became less and less sort of happy with sandwiches and needed more variety. So sandwiches became less attractive, I guess. But that was just the evolution of the journey. So once I got back, I started sort of reflecting on the whole idea of being able to decide to take this journey and take 6 months out of my life from my normal life and have a different experience. And I know what gave me the ability to make that decision and to do the journey was my lessons I had learned in studying the Andean cosmology. And that's what gave me the sort of broaden my mind enough to consider walking across Canada and thinking that it might be possible. It's through the studying of the cosmology with Jose Luis Herrera. I remember one of the things that he often says is that you are the author of your story, and that's a big statement. We are the authors ultimately of our story, of what we do, and being my author of my story, I realized that the journey I was on, those 6 months, I wrote my story every day, and there was no one I answered to or I could refer to for decision making. There's no one I could sort of, what would you say, pass the buck onto for bad decisions, or they were all mine. And so I realized that the decisions I made daily, there was no sort of plan B, because there was nobody to discuss with. It was up to me to get out of bed or not get out of bed. It was up to me how long I wanted to sit and have coffee. It was up to me how long I wanted to walk, whether I should stop again and eat, or did I already spend enough time stopping? Should I stop and set up the tent here, or should I continue on? Everything was my choice, and they were simple choices, but there was no sort of consultation around. It was all me, and that's an interesting dynamic. Usually we have people around that we can sort of confer with on decisions. And although my life got pretty simple for 6 months, it did become totally my responsibility. So writing your own story, that is that's a huge concept. And what gives you the ability, will give me the ability to write my own story, is something that I realize that your story can be, the scope of your story that you wish to write can be broad or it can be narrow, and it's to do with, it's up to you and the work you've done in your life the sort of story you want to write. This may sound a bit vague, but your imagination is somewhat limited by your past. And it can be severely limited or mildly limited by your life and your past stories. And so there's a one of the first things that we do in studying Andean shamanism is we do a study and lessons on what we call dying to the past, dying to your past. And all it is, although it sounds quite dramatic, all it is dealing with and coming to terms with your past. And then how does that affect your future? And so by looking at your past and being at peace with your past, you open up, or I keep saying you, I mean you, but I opened up my future by understanding and being at peace with my past. If I wasn't, there would be more, what would you say, more walls that would limit my scope of what I think may happen tomorrow. And so by knocking down these walls, that might be a bit dramatic, by losing these walls and losing these restrictions, I open up my future. So that was and dealing with your past, dying to your past, is something that it's not just a one-time event. It's a lifetime event, dying to your past, because you've always got a new past. I mean, today is tomorrow's past. So, in really simple terms, I have to be comfortable with the lessons and the emotions of my past. I keep saying my past, but it's such we tell ourselves, consciously or subconsciously, we inform ourselves with our story. And if your past story determines your future, then nothing's going to change. So for me, working with my past, dying to my past, dying to the old, is what opened up my mind to the possibility that I would have a chance of walking across Canada. So it's a big subject, and in the medicine, I refer to the medicine as the lessons I've learned. In broad terms, I call it the medicine. So in studying the medicine, I've been able to understand that I am in total control of my own future, my own happiness. It's not up to anybody else. It's up to me, and I am the one to manifest my story tomorrow and the next day. That is, I am the author. So, I've titled this episode "Who is the Author," and that's it. I am the author of my story, and that's something I learned from the something that I've reinforced in my belief through the journey I did across Canada. So, thank you for listening, And we will talk to you later. Thank you.